It was supposed to be just another night, another comment lost in the endless noise of social media, another clip that would trend for a few hours and disappear by morning. That's how it usually works in the world of online celebrity drama. Things flare up fast, burn bright, and fade just as quickly. But this time, something felt different. Something deeper shifted beneath the surface, and what started as a moment quickly turned into something much harder to ignore. Because what T.I. heard that night didn't land like ordinary internet noise. It didn't feel like clout chasing or exaggerated theatrics. It felt direct, personal, and according to people who claimed to be close to the situation, it struck a nerve that had already been building over time. The source of it all, EMBARRASS, a figure known for being outspoken, unapologetically raw, and often controversial. Someone who has built his reputation on saying exactly what's on his mind, regardless of how it's received. That's part of his identity. That's what his audience expects from him. But this time, the reaction wasn't typical. Insiders suggest that what followed wasn't just frustration or irritation. It was something more intense, something heavier, a level of anger that reportedly caught even those closest to T.I. off guard. The kind of emotional reaction that doesn't just sit quietly. It builds, it pushes, it demands a response. The kind of moment where logic starts to take a back seat and emotion begins to take over. And according to whispers spreading online, that tension didn't stay contained to social media. Because just hours after Boosie publicly mocked T.I.'s son again, this time in a way many viewers described as more pointed, more deliberate, the situation reportedly moved offline, away from comment sections and Instagram clips, into private conversations, into spaces where things can escalate much faster and without an audience to slow them down. There are claims that phone calls were made, that voices were raised, that people who share connections with both sides attempted to step in and calm things down. And somewhere in the middle of that tension, something shifted. Something that, according to those same whispers, brought the situation dangerously close to becoming something much more serious than anyone expected. Now, it's important to be clear. Much of what's being said comes from unverified accounts and online speculation. There's no confirmed report of any violent incident actually taking place, but the intensity of the rumors alone has been enough to keep people watching closely. Fans are divided. Some dismiss the entire situation as exaggerated internet drama, another example of how social media can amplify conflict beyond reality. Others believe there's at least some truth hidden beneath the noise, that something did happen behind the scenes, even if the full details haven't been made public. And what's made everything even more noticeable is the silence from others in the industry. Figures who would normally weigh in, comment, or take sides have been unusually quiet. And in situations like this, silence doesn't calm things, it adds to the mystery. So what really happened? Did T.I. reach a breaking point? Did Boosie push things too far? Or is this another case of speculation, growing larger than the actual event? To understand why this situation feels so intense, you have to go back, because this wasn't a sudden explosion. It was a slow burn. This wasn't just two rappers exchanging words for attention. It was tension that had been building gradually, layer by layer, over time. At the center of it are two very different personalities with very different approaches to fame, influence, and expression. Fans began tagging T.I. repeatedly, flooding his posts, sending him clips, asking, sometimes demanding, a response, telling him to defend his son, to say something, to step in. And if there's one thing widely understood, it's that T.I. does not take public disrespect lightly, especially when it involves his family. Behind the scenes, the tension reportedly continued to build. Conversations became more intense. People within their shared circles attempted to mediate, to calm things down before they reached a point of no return. But sometimes, momentum takes over. And once it does, it becomes difficult to stop. One source described the situation as no longer feeling like rap beef, but something more personal, something that carried real emotional weight, something that had the potential to go too far if it wasn't addressed carefully. But no clear resolution came. And then, just when things seemed like they might stabilize, another comment was made. Another jab. And this one hit harder than the rest. It wasn't subtle, it wasn't ambiguous. It felt direct, intentional, like a push. And sometimes, all it takes is one final push to tip everything over the edge. That moment, that exact moment, is where everything changed. Because from that point on, wasn't just about words anymore. It was about what those words triggered. And once that line is crossed, there's no easy way to go back. Up until that point, everything had followed a pattern people were used to seeing. Online jabs, viral clips, fans arguing back and forth in comment sections like it was just another chapter in the endless cycle of internet drama. It felt intense in the moment, sure, but most of the time, those situations burn out just as quickly as they rise. That's the nature of social media, loud, fast, and temporary. But according to multiple insider accounts, what happened next didn't follow that pattern. It wasn't planned. It wasn't calculated. And it definitely wasn't supposed to go as far as it did. Because once emotions took over, there was no controlling what came next. What followed pushed the situation into a level of chaos that no one, not even the people directly involved, seemed prepared for. The confrontation that unfolded wasn't just shocking, it was unsettling, deeply unsettling. This is where everything stopped being about words, opinions, and online bravado, and started becoming something far more serious. Something real. And what Boosie Badass may not have realized in that moment was just how far he had pushed T.I. Because this time, the reaction was different. Everything reached a breaking point on a night that, on the surface, looked completely normal. There were no warnings, no announcements, no obvious signs that anything was about to explode. To the outside world, it was just another night in the constant noise of celebrity culture. But behind the scenes, everything was already boiling. According to circulating reports, Boosie went live once again. At first, nothing seemed unusual. He's known for speaking freely, going on long tangents, sharing whatever comes to mind in real time. Fans tuned in expecting exactly that: energy, opinions, maybe a few controversial takes. And that's how it started. But then something shifted. The tone changed. What began as a casual rant slowly turned into something more focused, more deliberate. This time it didn't feel random, it felt targeted. Within minutes, clips from that live stream began spreading online. At first, the reaction was typical: people laughing, reacting, sharing. But then he said it again. He brought up King Harris. Not casually, not indirectly. This time the tone carried something heavier, a mix of mockery and provocation. He repeated certain phrases, stretched moments for emphasis, and laughed in a way that didn't feel like humor anymore. It felt like a challenge. And then came the line. The one fans say crossed every boundary. Within seconds, everything changed. The reaction online exploded. Comments flooded in. Notifications lit up across platforms. And one thing started happening over and over again. People began tagging T.I. Yo, you seeing this? He wildin' now. This ain't funny anymore. The shift was instant. What had started as entertainment turned into concern. And this time, something different happened. Because unlike before, T.I. didn't stay silent. According to sources, within minutes of those clips going viral, calls were being made. Not casual conversations, not calm discussions. These were urgent, tense, charged with emotion. No one agrees on exactly what was said. But every version of the story shares one key detail. It involved King Harris. Again. And that's when everything snapped. According to reports, T.I. moved forward instantly. No pause, no hesitation, just reaction, pure, immediate, driven by emotion that had been building for too long. What followed was chaos. People rushed in, voices overlapped, hands reached out trying to separate the two before things went too far. The entire room shifted in seconds, from tense to explosive. For a brief moment, just a few seconds, it felt like everything was about to spiral into something much worse. One insider described it in a way that stayed with everyone who heard it. It wasn't just a fight, it felt like he lost control. And then something else happened. In the middle of that chaos, someone shouted, "Chill, this ain't going there." That word, there, quickly became the center of speculation. Because what does there mean? That's where things become more unsettling. Some reports, unconfirmed but widely shared, suggest that in that moment the situation was dangerously close to escalating beyond a physical confrontation. There's no official confirmation of anything beyond that. No reports, no verified details. But according to those claiming to have been there, the energy alone was enough to scare everyone involved. Because it didn't feel like anger anymore. It felt heavier, like something that could cross a line that couldn't be undone. And in that moment, everything shifted. People pulled T.I. back. Others stepped between him and Boosie. The shouting turned into controlled, tense voices, warnings instead of reactions. Because suddenly, everyone knew. And understood the same thing. This wasn't just rap beef anymore. Because instead of calming down, instead of fading away, the situation exploded even further. What had once been contained behind closed doors spilled fully into public view, turning into something impossible to ignore. The focus shifted from what happened to what happens next. And what happened next didn't stay quiet for long. Within hours of those alleged messages spreading, everything went public in a way no one could control. Social media didn't just react, it transformed into something chaotic, almost like a digital battlefield. Clips resurfaced from past interviews, old live streams, previous moments that people now saw differently. Screenshots, real or fake, spread rapidly. Rumors about voice notes, private calls, and behind-the-scenes confrontations flooded timelines all at once. What had once been whispers, quiet speculation, insider talk, became loud, unavoidable, and impossible to contain. The names T.I. and Boosie Badass were suddenly everywhere, trending across platforms. But what made it even more intense was the third name now being pulled into the center of everything, King Harris. And this time it wasn't jokes or casual commentary. It wasn't debate. It was chaos. Fake leaked direct messages started appearing across platforms, some so detailed that they looked almost believable. One set allegedly showed T.I. drawing a clear line, warning Boosie to stay away from his family. Another claimed to show Boosie brushing it off, laughing at the situation, treating it like just another viral moment that would pass. None of it was confirmed. None of it was verified. But that didn't slow anything down, because the internet doesn't wait for proof. It reacts first and questions later. And the reactions came fast. One viral post, shared thousands of times within minutes, read, "He really thought it was sweet until it was." That single sentence shifted the tone of the entire conversation. Now people weren't just watching, they were choosing sides. There was no neutral ground anymore, no middle space. Just two camps forming in real time, those standing behind T.I. and those defending Boosie. And with every passing minute, the divide between them grew deeper. Then came the voice note rumors, unverified, unconfirmed, but everywhere. Audio clips began circulating, claiming to capture heated exchanges, raised voices, aggressive tones. Some listeners believed they were hearing real threats. Others immediately dismissed them as edited, manipulated, completely fake. But once again, the truth didn't matter as much as the reaction. Because once something enters the social media ecosystem, it takes on a life of its own. And the reactions only intensified. Some fans stood firmly with T.I., arguing that he had every right to be angry, especially when it involved his family. Others defended Boosie just as strongly, saying he was simply being himself, outspoken, unfiltered, unwilling to change for anyone. And then there were those in the middle, the ones who weren't laughing anymore, because what had once felt like entertainment now felt unpredictable, real, potentially dangerous. But just when it seemed like things couldn't escalate further, they did. Because that's when a new claim surfaced, one that shifted the narrative once again. According to an alleged industry insider, the confrontation everyone was talking about wasn't even the first one. There had supposedly been multiple attempts to handle things privately before anything became public. Conversations behind closed doors, warnings delivered through mutual connections, tense interactions that never made headlines. If that claim is true, then this wasn't a sudden explosion at all. It was a slow build. A situation that had been escalating quietly, layer by layer, until it finally reached a breaking point that couldn't be contained anymore. And then came another alleged leak, one that hit even harder. It suggested that after the confrontation, there were discussions about what would happen if things escalated again. And suddenly, that one line, "Next time it won't stop," took on a completely different meaning. It didn't feel like a random quote anymore. It felt serious. Some interpreted it as frustration, others saw it as a warning, and some went even further, calling it a threat. That's when the tone of the entire conversation shifted again, because now people weren't just talking about the past, they were thinking about the future. Would this situation escalate again? Would there be another confrontation? And if there was, would it end the same way or something worse? Even celebrities began reacting, but carefully. No direct statements, no clear sides. Just subtle, cryptic messages. One artist posted about lines that shouldn't be crossed when it comes to family. Another suggested people were taking things too seriously, that words aren't the same as actions. And just like that, the divide grew even deeper. Because this wasn't just about two individuals anymore. It had turned into a broader conversation about boundaries, respect, freedom of speech, and how far is too far. Then came another moment that shifted everything yet again. A new clip surfaced. Not from the confrontation, not from the aftermath, but from earlier that same day. In it, Boosie appeared relaxed, laughing, unbothered. Speaking about the situation like it wasn't serious at all, like it wasn't about to spiral into something much bigger. And that clip split the narrative once again. Some people saw it and believed he didn't realize how serious things had become. Others saw the same clip and came to a completely different conclusion, that he knew exactly what he was doing. Was it reckless behavior or intentional provocation? Was he underestimating the situation or controlling it? And more importantly, did he underestimate T.I.? Because according to some insider claims, that's exactly what happened. He thought it would stay online. He didn't think it would turn into something real, but it did. And now the consequences were unfolding in real time. Reports began circulating that security around both sides had increased. Public appearances became more limited. Movements became quieter, more controlled, more private. And behind the scenes, the tension didn't disappear. It stayed unresolved because no apology had been made. And without any clear resolution, the situation remained exactly where it started, unfinished, unpredictable, and still very much alive. No official statements had clarified anything. No one had backed down. And when situations like that stay unresolved, when tension lingers without explanation, they don't fade. They grow. They morph into something larger, something more unpredictable. That's exactly what was happening with the T.I. and Boosie Badazz situation. Because just when people thought things might finally slow down, a new question began circulating across social media. What if that night, the night everyone had been dissecting endlessly, wasn't actually the worst part? That single question was enough to lock people into a cycle of watching, waiting, and refreshing feeds compulsively. It created a shared anxiety, an awareness that what had unfolded so far might have been just the buildup, the prelude to something far more serious. The reactions online grew louder with every passing hour. By the time things should have settled into the usual rhythm of celebrity gossip, they didn't. They escalated. This was no longer a private feud between two artists. It wasn't even just viral drama anymore. It had grown into a full-scale cultural moment, the kind that pulls in everyone: fans, critics, bloggers, fellow artists, and commentators. Once a situation reaches that magnitude, the narrative stops belonging to the people directly involved. It becomes something bigger, more uncontrollable, something that spins faster than anyone can manage. Within hours, hashtags connected to both T.I. and Boosie dominated timelines. Clips were being reposted at a rate that made it impossible to track. Old interviews resurfaced. Past comments were dissected as if they were clues in a larger story, and every new detail sparked fresh debates. People weren't just reacting to the present anymore. They were rewriting the past. Old moments where Boosie had joked about other artists, families were dug up and shared widely. Clips of T.I. speaking about respect, discipline, and boundaries were repurposed as evidence of a larger principle. The conversation began to explode in multiple directions simultaneously. On one side, supporters of T.I. were unwavering and passionate. "You don't play with a man's child, period. He gave warnings. He tried to handle it privately. Words stopped being jokes at some point." On the other side, just as loud and just as insistent, defenders of Boosie argued, "This is hip-hop, people talk. If you can't handle it, stay off the internet. Boosie has always been the same. Why act surprised now? You can't threaten someone over words." And right in the middle of all this, one name kept getting pulled deeper into the storm: King Harris. While the internet argued, debated, and chose sides, King Harris was no longer just part of the story. He had become the story itself. What had started as a feud between T.I. and Boosie Badass transformed into something far more layered and far more uncomfortable. The spotlight had shifted entirely, and suddenly, King Harris was no longer on the sidelines. He was at the center of a conversation he didn't fully control. Fans began analyzing every detail about him. Old videos resurfaced, past statements were replayed and dissected. Every nuance of his tone and every gesture were scrutinized. His public image, previously a combination of teenage rebellion and social media expression, was now being reframed as evidence in a much larger narrative, something that no one involved could completely steer. And that's when the conversation started to feel different. This wasn't just rap beef anymore. It had become personal. Social media users, commentators, and even casual observers began asking questions that went far beyond music or celebrity culture. They asked about parenting, about respect, about ego, and about the consequences of public exposure. The discussion fractured the online community further. It was no longer simply Team T.I. versus Team Boosie. Now there were layers of debate, conversations about values, responsibility, boundaries, and the influence of fame on family life. The debate quickly escalated beyond Twitter and Instagram. Podcasts began breaking down every moment frame by frame. YouTube channels ran detailed analyses. TikTok creators turned the unfolding story into serialized content, timelines, theories, hidden meanings, and what really happened breakdowns. Everyone had an opinion, everyone had a version of the truth. And that's exactly where the situation grew complicated. For every leak, there was a counterclaim. For every alleged message, a rebuttal. Somewhere in the middle of all that noise, the truth became almost impossible to find. Because the people at the center, T.I., Boosie, and King Harris, remained mostly silent. No official statements, no confirmations, no clarifications, just tension. And that silence didn't calm anyone. It exacerbated the uncertainty. When there's no clarity, rumors become facts in the minds of the public. Speculation starts to appear as evidence. And soon, the story takes on a life of its own, independent of reality. People began suggesting that this wasn't merely about one comment, one night, or one confrontation. That it went deeper. That it involved years of unspoken tension, clashing personalities, and unresolved disagreements quietly building behind the scenes. If that theory is accurate, everything the public had witnessed up to that point was just the surface. One post, shared quietly but rapidly picked up by a network of fans and commentators, captured this feeling perfectly. "Y'all think it's over. This ain't even the worst part." The line spread like wildfire because it raised a question no one was ready to answer. If what had already happened wasn't the worst, then what could possibly come next? That question kept people locked in, watching, waiting, refreshing feeds, because deep down, everyone sensed that the story was far from over. And just when the audience thought they had the story mapped out, thought the climax had passed, a new piece of information surfaced. This revelation didn't simply add to the narrative, it flipped it entirely. According to an alleged insider claiming connections to both sides, the confrontation that everyone had been dissecting was not supposed to happen at all. Not like that, not so intensely, and certainly not dangerously. The meeting between T.I. and Boosie was reportedly intended to be an intervention, not a conflict, not a trap, not an ambush, a controlled attempt to resolve the issues privately, with mutual contacts acting as mediators, ensuring the situation didn't spiral. Both sides allegedly agreed reluctantly to this meeting. The goal was clear: air grievances, establish boundaries, and prevent further escalation. And yet, despite these precautions, that night exploded into chaos. So what went wrong? According to the insider, something occurred just before the two met that changed everything. A message. Not the later, next time it won't stop text. A different one, shown minutes before T.I. and Boosie came face to face. Its contents remain unknown, but the source claimed that the tone shifted the moment it was received. What was supposed to be a controlled, private conversation devolved into confrontation. What was meant to be calm and mediated became tense and explosive. And then came the most unsettling question of all. What if the shift wasn't accidental? What if someone wanted it to happen? At this point, there's no proof, no confirmation, only whispers. But those whispers grew louder as new details began circulating. A name emerged, unverified, unconfirmed, but repeated enough that people began paying attention. Someone allegedly present that night, who may have played a role in escalating the situation at exactly the wrong moment. If true, this meant the story wasn't just about T.I. and Boosie anymore. Someone behind the scenes could have influenced events, fueling emotions and pushing things toward conflict. That possibility made the entire situation far bigger and more complex than anyone had realized. The narrative had evolved from online banter to a public confrontation, from personal messages to viral speculation, from social media reactions to a broader cultural debate. It was no longer just about two men clashing or a son being mocked. It had become a reflection of larger questions about family, respect, boundaries, and the responsibilities that come with public influence. Every comment, every clip, every unverified leak was interpreted through multiple lenses, creating a storm that couldn't be contained or silenced. And through it all, King Harris remained in the spotlight. The teenager, initially a peripheral figure, had become central to an unfolding story he could neither control nor predict. His behavior, his past moments, his tone in public videos, all were analyzed for hidden meanings, implications, and evidence supporting one narrative or another. What had once been ordinary teenage behavior or minor social media missteps was now scrutinized as part of a dangerous, escalating situation. At the same time, the broader audience, fans, critics, casual viewers, continued to speculate. Some saw T.I. as justified, defending family and setting boundaries. Others defended Boosie's freedom of expression, claiming that the internet amplifies tension beyond the control of either party. Still others warned that this wasn't just online drama anymore, that the intensity and unpredictability of the situation could have real-world consequences. It became impossible to separate performance from reality. Meanwhile, industry reactions remained measured but telling. Cryptic posts and subtle references suggested awareness and concern without naming anyone explicitly. Behind the scenes, conversations were reportedly ongoing, though no public statements clarified anything. Security reportedly increased for both sides, public appearances became limited, and movement became controlled. But the tension did not dissipate. It lingered, unresolved and ready to ignite again at any moment. The absence of clarity, the continued silence from the central figures, only amplified the perception that this was far from over. The story had moved beyond celebrity drama. It was now a complex, living narrative, fueled by speculation, perception, and social media amplification. Every rumor, every alleged leak, and every interpretation contributed to a growing sense that what had already happened might just be the opening chapter in something much larger. And with King Harris at the center, T.I. and Boosie on opposing sides, and whispers of external influence shaping events, the situation had transformed into something neither fans nor the participants could fully control. At its core, this wasn't just about a single confrontation or a viral clip anymore. It had become a cultural moment reflecting the intersections of fame, family, accountability, and influence. It was a lesson in how public life, social media, and personal boundaries can collide explosively. And as long as questions remained unanswered, as long as messages circulated without context, and as long as tension lingered behind the scenes, the story would continue to grow, unfolding in real time, impossible to predict and impossible to ignore. Because in this case, the internet doesn't let things die quietly. The drama doesn't fade. It expands, evolves, and demands attention. And for T.I., Boosie, and King Harris, what had started as a clash of words and online jabs had transformed into a complicated, ongoing saga, a story about reputation, family, and power that nobody could step away from without consequences. Every moment from that night, every message that leaked, every cryptic post and speculation became part of a living narrative. The narrative itself had become larger than the individuals involved, reaching beyond celebrity culture into broader debates about responsibility, respect, and the way conflicts play out in the digital age. And as long as the questions remained, what happens next? Who is involved? What was real and what was fabricated? The story would remain alive, simmering under the surface and waiting for its next chapter. Who was really in the wrong? That's the question everyone's asking, and yet no one has a definitive answer. Was it Boosie Badass, pushing boundaries and testing limits in a way that sparked real tension? Or was it T.I., reacting in a way that escalated something that might have been manageable if handled differently? The truth is, it depends on who you ask. Every angle has its defenders, every action has its interpretation, and every statement is dissected endlessly online. And do you honestly think this situation is over? Because based on everything that's happened, it doesn't look like it. From leaked messages to viral clips, from cryptic social media posts to rumors of behind-the-scenes influence, the story has only grown more layered. Every attempt to explain or justify one side fuels new speculation, and every unverified claim keeps the tension alive. What appeared to be a private conflict has now evolved into a public saga with multiple narratives and no clear resolution. Or is something even bigger coming next? That's the real question hanging over everything. The escalations so far suggest a momentum that isn't easily stopped. When situations reach this level of intensity, there's always a risk that the next development could surpass what has already occurred. Whether it's new footage, insider revelations, or further confrontations, the narrative is still very much in motion. The online community, the media, and the industry are all watching closely, waiting for the next twist. Because one thing is absolutely clear, this story is far from finished. Each clip, each message, each rumor adds another layer, making it increasingly difficult to predict what might happen next. And the audience isn't just observing, they're shaping the narrative in real time. Every comment, every shared post, every debate contributes to the ongoing story, influencing perception and momentum. If you've made it this far, then you already understand. This isn't just another celebrity story. This is a complex, evolving situation that intertwines fame, family, influence, and public perception. It's a story that unfolds in real time, with stakes that feel both personal and public. And the truth, the full truth, may still be out there, waiting to surface. So make sure you stay locked in, because if anything new comes out, new footage, verified confirmation, or an unexpected twist, you can be sure it will redefine what we think we know. And based on everything we've seen so far, one thing is undeniable: this story. It's only just beginning. The next chapter is still unwritten, and the impact could be far greater than anyone anticipates. The saga isn't just a headline. It's a live, unfolding narrative with consequences, interpretations, and unresolved tension. And as long as questions remain unanswered, the world will continue to watch, debate, and speculate. Because in moments like these, reality and perception collide, and the story grows far beyond the people at its center. This isn't over, not by a long shot. And if history has shown us anything, it's that when situations like this escalate online and offline, the next development can shift everything in an instant. So pay attention, because the story is still unfolding, and the next chapter may arrive when you least expect it.